My name is Julian Cole, and I am 68 years old. He abandoned my daughter when she needed him most. 6 years later, he showed up at her funeral, not to mourn, but to demand the $34 million she left me. He thought he could bully a grieving father. But when he saw who was standing behind me, his smug smile vanished instantly. I am so glad you are here. If you believe in justice for the ones we've lost, please like this video and subscribe. And tell me in the comments below where you are listening from. I want to know how far Anna's story has traveled. I, Julian Cole. A 68-year-old retired engineer should not be here. I should be in my woodshop, perhaps turning a small toy for a grandchild I will now never have. Instead, I am standing in front of a mahogany casket, a cold and polished luxury, staring at the face of my daughter Anna. She looks peaceful, but it's an unreal peace. The room at the funeral home is thick, with a silence broken only by muffled, distorted sobs. For me, the grief isn't a wave. It is a solid block of concrete that has set in my chest, sucking all the air out. Anna, 35 years old, a genius in AI ethics, the daughter I failed to protect from the world, and in the end, from her own body. The cancer came on too fast. Pancreatic. She fought it. She fought it the same way she built her company Tech Ethics from absolutely nothing. But this was one battle that logic and sheer force of will could not win. I feel a light hand on my shoulder, an old friend. I just nod, unable to form words. I am desperately trying to remember what she smelled like. Lemon verbena and old books. Now all I can smell is the overpowering scent of lilies, the suffocating sweet smell of the end. And that is when I see him. He is standing at the back entrance near the main doors. He does not look like a mourner. He looks like a venture capitalist appraising a newly liquidated asset. Nathan Reed, 6 years. For 6 solid years, I have not had to see that face, and now it appears in the one place it should never be. He's wearing a Tom Ford suit, an offensively perfect fit. His hair is slicked back. He is not crying. His eyes are scanning the room, gliding over Anna's black-clad business partners, past her college friends, who are weeping in each other's arms, and finally they land on me. Anger, hot and sudden, surges up my throat, cracking the concrete block. He has no right to be here. He is the man who nearly destroyed my daughter. He is the ghost in her life, the one whose name she never spoke after they went their separate ways. We just didn't fit anymore, Dad. She had told me 6 years ago, her voice frighteningly calm. But I am an engineer. I am trained to see structural fractures. I knew that calm was a defense mechanism. He was the one who abandoned her just as Tech Ethics was facing its first major financial hurdle, right before she landed her first big investor. He had taken her confidence and nearly her career with him. I remember the nights Anna came home, her eyes hollow, working silently on my sofa until 3 in the morning. He bailed when she needed a partner most. I watch him now. He is not moving. He is just observing. He is calculating. He is assessing the value in the room. The grief here is profound, tangible, but he is immune to it. He stands apart from it, breathing a different air. My wife Isabel died of a heart condition 10 years ago. Anna was all I had left, and now the man who tore her heart to pieces is standing 50 feet away, looking at me as if I am an obstacle, a piece of old furniture left in the room. I force myself to look away, to focus back on Anna, but I can't. I can feel his stare on my back like a drill. The line of guests begins to thin. One by one they come to me, they clasp my hand, they whisper their sincere, meaningless words. She was such a light, one says. She changed the industry, says another. I just nod. My throat is closed. When only a few close family friends remain, he begins to move. He doesn't hurry. He strolls his expensive shoes silent on the thick carpet. He adjusts the cuff of his shirt. He walks past the table of photographs displaying Anna's life. Anna at 5 on the red bicycle I'd rebuilt for her. Anna graduating from MIT with honors. Anna cutting the ribbon on the new Tech Ethics office building. He glances at them with mild, detached interest. Then he stops directly in front of me. A faint, almost sympathetic smile touches his lips. It makes me want to hit him. "Julian," he says. His voice is smooth as silk, utterly devoid of grief. "I'm so sorry about Anna." I just stare at him. The granite in my chest is solid ice. I say nothing. "She should have called me." He continues, glancing at the casket, as if we were old friends discussing a minor inconvenience. "We had so much unfinished business." His eyes meet mine again. There is no sadness there. There is only calculation. A cold, hard assessment. This was not a visit of condolence. This was an opening move. This was the beginning of a negotiation. He was not here to pay his respects. He was here to collect. I can feel the eyes of the remaining few people in the room on us. They see a young, handsome man in a sharp suit offering sympathy to the grieving father. They see a tragedy. I see a predator. He lowers his voice, leaning in just slightly, a pantomime of confidentiality. "I'm staying at the Four Seasons. We really need to talk, Julian, preferably before the lawyers get involved." He hasn't changed at all. The same arrogance, the same underlying assumption that he is the smartest person in any room and that everyone else is just a pawn to be moved. He assumes my grief has made me weak, that this old man, this 68-year-old engineer, is a simple problem to be managed. He is about to learn how wrong he is. He is about to learn exactly who Anna got her strength from. I finally find my voice. It comes out as a low gravel. "There is nothing," I say, each word costing me, "for you and me to talk about. Ever." I turn my back on him, a clear dismissal. I expect him to leave. He doesn't. I hear him sigh a small, impatient sound. "Julian, don't make this difficult. I was with her. I loved her." The lie is so audacious it almost makes me laugh. "You don't get to be here," I say, turning back to face him, my voice shaking with a rage I can barely contain. "You don't get to say her name. Get out." He holds up his hands, that same condescending, patient smile plastered on his face. "I understand you're upset, but you need to listen to me. I'm not going anywhere. Not until I get what's mine." The hook wasn't just set, it was pulling tight. He was still there. Back at my house after the quiet, hollow ride from the funeral home, he was still there. He had followed the procession back. Most guests, the real friends, the colleagues who respected Anna, had the decency to keep their condolences brief. They would drop off a casserole, murmur a few words, and leave me to my grief. The house was finally emptying. The oppressive scent of lilies had been replaced by the smell of baked ziti and stale coffee. I was standing in the hallway, my hand on the banister, planning to just go upstairs and lock the door. That's when he cornered me. He moved from the living room where he had been shamelessly eating a sandwich and blocked my path to the stairs. His plate was empty. His eyes were not. "Julian," he said again, that same infuriatingly calm tone. The pretense of sympathy was gone. Now it was just business. "I'm not leaving until we talk." I looked at him. The sheer naked audacity of it. To invade this day my home, my grief, with his own selfish agenda. "Mr. Reed," I said, my voice dangerously low, "you have 5 seconds to get out of my house before I call the police." He didn't flinch. He actually let out a small, impatient sigh, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Go ahead," he said, shrugging his Tom Ford suit. "Call them. It'll just make the lawyers' jobs easier. It establishes a pattern of hostility." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the words. Pattern of hostility. "What are you talking about?" I stated. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. He leaned against the wall, casual, proprietary. It made my skin crawl. Anna and I, he said, we had business. We had a life. That company, Tech Ethics, it was built on my concepts, my intellectual property. I felt a laugh, a dry, bitter bark escape my throat. Your concepts. You were a marketing intern. Anna was the coder. Anna was the architect. You were the coffee boy. His eyes hardened. The mask of civility slipped, revealing the cold, reptilian anger beneath. That's what she told you, isn't it, the old man? She always did know how to spin a story. He pushed himself off the wall and took a step closer. I didn't move. We have things to resolve, Julian. Serious financial matters. I was shaking, the exhaustion of the day evaporating into pure white-hot adrenaline. There is nothing to resolve, I spat. Her will is clear. Everything she had, everything she earned is mine. Now get out. That's when he laughed. Not a real laugh, but a short, sharp puff of air from his nostrils. A sound of pure condescension. Julian, you're making this so much harder than it needs to be. He crossed his arms, leaning back against my wall as if he owned it. I don't think you're grasping the situation. You think this is a request. It's not. My hand was already reaching for my phone in my pocket. I warned you. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, he said, waving a dismissive hand. It'll just make my lawyer's affidavit more compelling. Grieving father in a state of emotional distress forcibly removes surviving fiancé from the premises. It paints a very clear, very useful picture for the court. The words hit me one by one like small hard stones. Fiancé. The word didn't compute. It was absurd. It was a grotesque lie. You. What did you just call yourself? I whispered, my voice hoarse. He smiled. It was a slow, predatory smile that didn't touch his cold eyes. Oh, did Anna never tell you that's a shame? We were engaged, Julian. We were going to be married. He said it with such confidence, such casual certainty, that for a split second, the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I pictured Anna, my brilliant, logical, fiercely independent daughter, engaged to this parasite. It was impossible. That's a lie, I said, my voice shaking. You're a liar. You left her. You abandoned her 6 years ago. I did not abandon her. He snapped, his patience finally breaking. We had a disagreement. A professional one. I told her the company wasn't ready to scale. She was too emotional, too attached. I stepped away to give her space. But we never broke up. Not really. He was twisting the past, repainting history with his own self-serving brush. She told me you were gone. I insisted, my heart pounding. She told me it was over. She told you what you wanted to hear, he shot back. She told you what made her look strong. But she always kept in touch. She always knew she could rely on me. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. I could smell his expensive cologne, a scent that felt like a violation in my quiet home. The point is, Julian, my legal standing as her fiancé is, let's just say, very strong. Stronger than yours, anyway. You're just the father. I was the partner, the future husband. He let the title hang in the air, a declaration of war. He was no longer a guest. He was an occupying force. And he was just getting started. His words hung in the air, thick and toxic. Fiancé, partner, future husband. Each one was a desecration of Anna's memory. Each one was a calculated lie. My mind, the engineer's mind, started to race past the grief. It was looking for the mechanism, the leverage, the angle. What was he playing at? This wasn't just an emotional claim. It was a strategic position. He was building a foundation for something. You are delusional, I said, my voice cold and steady. The shaking had stopped. A different kind of energy was taking over. a cold, hard fury. Anna had not spoken your name in 6 years. You were a footnote. A mistake she corrected. You are no one. I took a step toward him, asserting my ownership of the space. This was my house. This was my daughter. I'm going to say this one last time. Get out. He didn't move. He just watched me, that reptilian smile widening, as if I had just confirmed something for him. That's the anger I was talking about, he said, nodding slowly. That's the hostility. Thank you for that. My lawyer will be thrilled. He then reached into the inner pocket of his perfect suit and pulled out a slim, expensive-looking business card. He didn't offer it to me. He just held it between his fingers. But you're right. You're partly right. This isn't just about our relationship. This is about what she took from me. I froze. She took nothing from you. She gave you a job. She gave you a chance. You were nothing before you met her, and you were nothing after you left. Wrong, he snapped. The silky smooth voice was gone, replaced by a venomous hiss. Tech ethics, the entire concept, the algorithm for moral choice auditing. That was my idea. It came from my graduate thesis. Anna was just the coder. She was the technician who built the engine. I was the architect who designed the car. It was the most incredible, most audacious lie I had ever heard. Anna had lived and breathed that algorithm. It was born from her frustration with the soulless tech world, her desire to build something that mattered. You're insane, I said, but a thread of ice was now winding its way up my spine. This was his angle. This was the attack. He wasn't just claiming to be her lover. He was claiming to be her creator. That company was Anna's. Every line of code, every late night, every single sacrifice. That was all her. Was it? He countered, his voice smooth again. Because I have the emails. I have the text messages. From 6 years ago. From 5 years ago. Even from last year. Anna and I, we were always in touch. He saw the shock on my face and his smile widened. Oh, she didn't tell you? Of course not. She couldn't let her father think she was still talking to the man who abandoned her. We were sorting things out. We were discussing my stake. I felt nauseous. Was it possible, had Anna, my strong, brilliant daughter, been so entangled with this monster that she couldn't break free? Had she been lying to me? No. It couldn't be. It was another one of his manipulations. You're bluffing, I said. You have nothing. $34 million, he said, letting the number drop into the silence of the room. That's the current valuation, give or take. 34 million. And I'm not going to let a grieving, sentimental old man lock that money away in some dusty foundation in her name. That money was ours. It was our future. He finally placed the business card on the small table by the stairs. My attorney, Mr. Harrison, will be sending you a formal notice. We are contesting the will. There is no we, I growled. There is only you, a vulture. I am her fiancé, Julian, and I am her business partner, and I have proof. He tapped his pocket. I have emails discussing the intellectual property. I have texts where she admits the original idea was mine. And I have... He paused for dramatic effect, his eyes glinting with triumph. I have the ring. My blood ran cold. What? What ring? The engagement ring, he said, his voice dropping to a faux somber tone. The one I gave her. The one she kept. The one she was still wearing on a chain around her neck when she died. Did you not see it? Julian, did you not even look at your own daughter? The cruelty of the question was staggering. He was weaponizing my grief, turning my last moments with her into a liability. I'm sure the coroner's office has it in her personal effects. A 2-carat cushion cut, hard to miss. This was the hook, the terrible sinking hook. Was he lying? It was so specific, so detailed. a detail I, in my haze of grief, could have easily missed. And if he was telling the truth about the ring, what else was he telling the truth about? Were there emails? Did she really keep in touch with him? The simple, clear narrative of my daughter's life was suddenly fracturing, becoming a dark, complicated mess. And this man, Nathan, was at the center of it, holding the hammer. "So," he said, straightening his tie. He looked like he had just closed a successful deal. "My attorney will file an injunction tomorrow to freeze the estate pending a full hearing. I'd advise you not to try and move any assets." He started to walk toward the door, then stopped and looked back at me, his face a mask of false sympathy. "You should have just taken my call, Julian. We could have settled this. A reasonable split. 50-50. But you wanted to be difficult. Now I'm just going to take it all." He opened the front door and stepped out into the evening air, leaving me standing in the hallway of my silent, empty house, the house Anna grew up in. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun. The law office of Ms. Evelyn Shaw was on the 42nd floor of a glass and steel tower downtown. The room was the opposite of my home. There was no warmth, no history. Just a long, polished obsidian table, chrome chairs, and a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking a gray, indifferent city. It was a place built for conflict, not for comfort. I sat at one end, my knuckles white on the armrests. Nathan sat directly across from me. He wasn't alone. He had brought his attorney, Mr. Harrison, a man who looked exactly like his expensive, soulless suit. They were whispering to each other, Nathan smiling, Harrison nodding. They looked relaxed, confident. They looked like they had already won. I felt old. I felt tired. I was a 68-year-old engineer who understood concrete and stress loads, not legal maneuvering and predatory smiles. For a moment, I felt a crushing wave of despair. Anna should be here. She would know how to handle this. She would see right through them. I was just her father. Then the door opened. A woman entered. She was not who I expected. Ms. Evelyn Shaw was perhaps in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a dark navy suit. She was sharp, precise, and carried an aura of absolute, unshakable control. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, severe bun, and her eyes behind a pair of minimalist glasses were the color of steel. They swept over the room, acknowledging Nathan and his lawyer with a curt nod, and then they rested on me. There was no pity in her gaze, no sympathy. There was just assessment. It was the most comforting thing I had felt all day. This was not a woman who would be bullied. This was not a woman who would be fooled. This was the woman from the teaser. This was the woman who had stood behind me at the funeral, the one who had made Nathan's smile vanish. She sat at the head of the table, placing a single deceptively thin file in front of her. She didn't open it. Not yet. She simply steepled her fingers and looked directly at Nathan. "Mr. Reed, Mr. Harrison, welcome." Her voice was like her appearance, clean sharp, and with no room for interpretation. "M.M.," Harrison said, giving a slick, practiced nod. "We are here, as you know, representing Mr. Reed's interests as the surviving fiancé and creative partner of the deceased." Ms. Shaw's expression did not change. She didn't even blink. "Your petition has been noted," she said, her voice flat. She then turned her steel-gray eyes to me. "Mr. Cole, I was Anna's attorney for the last 5 years. I want you to know that I am not just the executor of this will. I drafted it. I understood your daughter's intentions perfectly." She was sending a message to all of us. She then placed her hand on the file. The room was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the city 42 floors below. Nathan leaned forward, his smug smile back in place, ready to hear the opening bid. He thought he knew what was coming. He was wrong. Ms. Shaw placed her glasses carefully on her nose. She opened the simple, thin file. It contained only 2 pages. "This," she announced to the room, "is the last will and testament of Anna Isabel Cole. It was executed and filed with my office on October 11th of this year, less than 30 days ago. My breath caught in my throat. So recent. She had done this from her hospital bed. She knew. She knew she was dying, and she was preparing her defenses. Nathan's lawyer Harrison shifted in his chair, his own yellow legal pad ready. He clearly expected a complicated document, something old, something full of the ambiguities and loopholes he was paid to exploit. I will read the relevant bequeathal clause. Ms. Shaw continued, her voice cutting through the sterile air. It is Section 3. I will read it in its entirety. She did not look up. She simply read, her voice a flat legal monotone, an instrument of fact. Section 3, Disposition of Assets. I, Anna Isabel Cole, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare that all my worldly possessions, assets, and financial holdings, both real and intangible. She paused, her eyes scanning the page, including, but not limited to, my 100% ownership stake in Tech Ethics Incorporated, with a current valuation of $34.2 million. Nathan leaned forward slightly. His smug smile was still plastered on his face, but his eyes were fixed on her, bright and greedy. He was waiting for his name. He was waiting for the codicil, the amendment, the clause that would let him in. Harrison had his expensive pen poised over his pad, ready to take notes, ready to find the weakness. Ms. Shaw continued, her voice as steady and cold as a surgeon's scalpel. All of this I bequeath solely and entirely to my father, Julian Cole. The words landed on the obsidian table with the finality of a gavel strike. Just like that. Clean, brutal, absolute. Harrison's pen stopped moving mid-stroke. He slowly looked up from his pad, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. He looked at Nathan. Nathan's smile didn't just vanish. It froze, cracked, and then crumbled from his face. A mask of raw disbelief and sudden ugly rage replaced it. What? Nathan breathed the word, a sharp, involuntary exhale. That's it, read the rest. There's nothing else. Ms. Shaw slowly lifted her gaze from the page, her steel-gray eyes meeting his over the rim of her glasses. That is the entirety of Section 3, Mr. Reed. The remainder of the document pertains to funeral arrangements and the naming of myself as executor. There are no other beneficiaries named. The document is signed, witnessed, notarized, and legally ironclad. Your client, she said, her gaze shifting to Harrison, is not mentioned anywhere in this document. The silence that followed was heavier and colder than any I had ever experienced. The first move had been made, and it was Anna's from beyond the grave. Before I could even process the victory, Harrison, Nathan's lawyer, cleared his throat, a sharp professional sound that sliced through the tension. Ms. Shaw, he said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone. While we appreciate your diligence, my client, Mr. Reed, formally contests the validity of this document. He said the word document as if it were a piece of trash. It was clearly signed under duress or undue influence from Mr. Cole at a time when the deceased was not of sound mind. Anna was perfectly lucid until the very end. I growled, the words escaping before I could stop them. Exactly the kind of hostility I mentioned. Nathan interjected, his voice thick with false sorrow. He looked at Ms. Shaw, his eyes wide and pleading. He's been trying to poison her against me for years. He couldn't stand that she loved me, that we built her company. Harrison raised a hand, silencing his client. What my client means, Ms. Shaw, is that we have significant evidence of a long-standing, uninterrupted romantic and professional partnership. He opened a pristine leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. He slid a few items across the obsidian table. The first was a photograph. It was Anna and Nathan, 6 or 7 years ago, clinking champagne glasses, beaming at the camera. It was from before he broke her. Exhibit A, Harrison said. A celebration of their engagement 6 years ago. Nathan looked at the photo, his face a perfect mask of tragic remembrance. She was so happy, he whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear, before he got in her head. Harrison pushed another document forward. It was a printout of an email chain. The dates were, to my horror, from only 18 months ago. It was from Anna's account addressed to Nathan. It read, "Nathan, I've been thinking about what you said. About the early days. It'll always be our baby." Exhibit B, Harrison said. The baby in question is tech ethics. A clear admission of his foundational involvement. That's not... She was probably just being polite, I said, my voice rising. Mr. Cole... Ms. Shaw said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting me off. Her eyes were not on me. They were not on the emails. They were fixed with cold, analytical precision on Nathan. Nathan, for his part, was now playing the final card. He looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumped. She kept the ring, Evelyn, he said, using her first name, a disgusting attempt at intimacy. She never gave it back. She told me she wore it. Every day. It's in her personal effects. The room went silent again. Harrison leaned back, his work done. He had planted the seed of doubt. The emails were ambiguous. The photo was old. But the ring was a physical object, a symbol. It was the proof he had threatened me with. Shaw turned her head slowly away from Nathan. She looked past the lawyers, past the damning twisted evidence, and fixed her steel-gray eyes directly on me. Julian, she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. Do you know anything about this engagement ring? I stared at Ms. Shaw. Her steel-gray eyes were locked on me, demanding an answer. The ring. Did I know about the ring? The silence in the room was absolute. Nathan and his lawyer watched me, their expressions a mix of pity and predatory triumph. I felt a flash of panic. I tried to remember the hospital, the last days, her frail hand in mine. Was there a chain I couldn't see past the tubes, the IVs, the sickeningly sweet smell of antiseptic? My mind was a fog of grief. I don't know. I stammered, the admission tasting like ash in my mouth. I didn't see. Nathan let out a small, sharp sigh, a sound of manufactured pain. He never saw her, Evelyn. He just saw what he wanted to see. Before I could snarl at him, Harrison, Nathan's lawyer, held up a hand. That's enough, Nathan. Because whether Mr. Cole saw the ring or not is for the moment irrelevant. He reached into his briefcase and produced another document. This one was heavy, official, stamped and signed. He slid it onto the obsidian table. As of 9:05 this morning, we filed an emergency petition with the probate court based on the evidence we've just presented. Ms. Shaw's eyes finally left mine. She picked up the document. Her face remained impassive, but I saw her jaw clench just once. And Harrison continued, his voice resonating with victory. As of 10:30 a.m., Judge Wallace granted our petition. He tapped the paper with a perfectly manicured finger. This is a temporary injunction, a full freeze on the entire estate of Anna Cole. The room tilted. I gripped the armrests. What does that mean? Harrison looked at me, his eyes cold and devoid of any emotion. It means, Mr. Cole, that you can't touch a single dollar of that $34 million. You can't sell her stock. You can't access her bank accounts. You can't even pay her outstanding medical bills from the estate. That money, our money, is officially frozen until a judge can hear our full complaint. He had done it. Nathan had actually done it. His pack of lies, his ambiguous emails, his old photographs, it was all just plausible enough. It was enough to convince a judge to slam the steel door shut. I was the beneficiary of a $34 million estate, and in that moment I was powerless. I couldn't access a single cent of my daughter's legacy. Nathan leaned back in his chair, the smug, satisfied smile returning to his face. He had won the first round. He had drawn first blood. He had successfully painted me as the hostile old man, and he had taken control. The anger in my chest was no longer a hot flash. It was a cold, hard, dense object. He was winning. Nathan and his lawyer stood up. Harrison slid his documents back into his pristine briefcase. Nathan adjusted his tie, his face glowing with the smug satisfaction of a battle won. He looked at me not with hatred, but with a dismissive pity that was far worse. He saw me as a relic, a sad old man who had just been expertly outmaneuvered. They thought the game was over. They thought they had me. They were standing in the sterile high-rise office, masters of their universe of paper and procedure. I did not stand up. I did not yell. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing my rage or my despair. I simply sat there. I went silent. The cold, hard fury in my chest wasn't gone. It was crystallizing. It was solidifying from a messy emotional state into something hard, dense, and useful. An engineer's mind doesn't just see problems. It sees systems. It sees load-bearing walls and weak points. And as Nathan and his lawyer made their way to the door, my mind, my 68-year-old engineer's mind, finally pushed past the fog of grief and started to work. I remembered Anna. Not the sick girl in the hospital bed, but the brilliant, focused woman who built a $34 million company from scratch. She was a woman who dealt in facts, a woman who built firewalls, a woman who understood better than anyone that monsters were real. She had dealt with Nathan before. She knew exactly who he was. And then it hit me. A memory. A conversation from about a year ago when we were having dinner. She had been talking about a hostile takeover attempt by a competitor. "You can't just trust the cloud, Dad," she had said, swirling the ice in her glass. "You can't trust digital. You always need a hard copy. You always need an air gap. You always need a contingency plan." I looked up. Nathan and Harrison were at the door, shaking Ms. Shaw's hand, a grotesque pantomime of professionalism. "Wait," I said. My voice was low, but it cut through the room. Nathan and his lawyer paused, turning around. Nathan looked annoyed, as if I were a loose end he had forgotten to tie up. I ignored them. I looked only at Ms. Shaw. Her steel-gray eyes met mine. The mask of the impassive lawyer was still there, but I saw something else behind it. She was waiting. "Ms. Shaw," I said, my voice clear and steady for the first time in days. "You said you were Anna's lawyer for 5 years. Did she ever mention her private archive?" Harrison scoffed. "All digital archives are frozen by the injunction, Mr. Cole." I continued to look only at Ms. Shaw. Not a digital one, a physical one, a server, a hardwired offline air-gapped server she kept in her apartment. She was paranoid about security. She was paranoid about him. Nathan's smug smile faltered just a fraction. She called it, I said, the memory becoming perfectly clear, her contingency plan. The moment Harrison and Nathan left, Ms. Shaw was already on her phone. "I'm calling the building manager at Anna's condo. We're going over there. Now." Harrison's smug voice was still echoing in my ears. A full freeze on the entire estate. They had locked the gates, thinking the treasure was inside. They had no idea the real weapon was somewhere else entirely. Anna's apartment was in a sleek, modern building in South Beach. It was minimalist, clean, and a fortress. The doorman, a man named Miguel, whom Anna always spoke of fondly, looked relieved to see me. "Mr. Cole, thank God. I'm so sorry about Anna. She was a wonderful woman." His eyes darted nervously toward the street. "Sir, I have to tell you, that other man, Nathan, he was already here." My blood ran cold. "When, this morning, before the funeral," Miguel said, his face tight with disapproval. "He came in, told me he was her fiancé, said he needed to get upstairs to get a suit for the service. He was very smooth. But," Miguel pointed to the elevator keypad, "Miss Anna's system. It requires a key fob and a biometric thumbprint. His fob was denied. The system flagged it. He got very angry. He said he'd be back with a court order. I told him I couldn't help him without your authorization, sir. He had been planning this for days. The injunction wasn't his opening move. It was his second. The first was trying to get in here. To what plant evidence steal something? Shaw looked at me. Julian, let's go up. The apartment was silent. It still smelled like her. Lemon verbena and something electric like new computers. It was heartbreakingly neat. Her whole life perfectly organized, waiting for her to come back. Where Julian Ms. Shaw asked, her voice soft but urgent. Where would she keep an offline server? I didn't go to her office. I went to her bedroom closet. Anna was like me. We were engineers. We liked hidden compartments. Behind a false panel at the back of her closet, the one I had helped her install, was a small fireproof digital safe. I entered the code, not her birthday, but our code, the date Isabel, my wife, had passed away. 08/14/2015. The safe clicked open. There was no jewelry, no bundles of cash, just a single black solid-state hard drive. It was heavy in my hand. It felt dense, significant. I brought it out to the living room. Ms. Shaw had her laptop open on the glass coffee table. She plugged it in. The drive whirred to life. A single, simple password prompt appeared on the screen. My hand was shaking as I turned the drive over. Anna was meticulous. She labeled everything. And there on the bottom was a small white label printed from her label maker. 4 simple characters. My heart stopped. It didn't say backup or work. It said, R, insurance. Nathan Reed, insurance. This wasn't a memory drive. This was a dead man's switch. This was the contingency plan. This was Anna's final move, prepared years in advance. She knew he would come back. As we both stared at the blinking cursor, wondering what password a genius would use to lock away her deepest secrets, Ms. Shaw's phone buzzed on the table. It was an email. She read it, and for the first time her steel-gray eyes flashed with a hot, sharp anger. "Damn him," she whispered. She turned the screen to face me. It was a legal notification from Harrison. "Ms. Shaw," I read aloud, my voice trembling, "please be advised that we are filing an additional emergency motion to be heard tomorrow morning. My client, Mr. Reed, as the grieving fiancé, is petitioning the court for immediate and sole access to the deceased's personal residence. He needs to retrieve his personal effects, including his clothing, his toiletries, and the engagement ring, which he believes is being unlawfully withheld by Mr. Cole." The walls were closing in. They were coming for the apartment. They didn't know this drive existed, but they were about to seize everything in the room, including it. The injunction had locked us out of the money, and now this motion would lock us out of the truth. I looked at the blinking cursor. "We have to get in this, Evelyn," I said, my voice a low growl. "We have to get in it now, before they lock this door too." The clock wasn't just ticking, it was pounding. The next morning, I didn't even have to leave my house to feel the next punch land. My phone started vibrating on the kitchen counter at 6 a.m. It was Ms. Shaw. Her voice was clipped, all business. "Julian, I'm warning you, stay off the internet today, and whatever you do, do not check your email for news alerts." "Evelyn, what's happened?" I asked, my blood already turning cold. "He's done exactly what we expected a cornered rat would do," she said. "He's taken the fight public. He's trying to poison the jury pool and pressure the judge." A moment later, a link appeared on my phone. It was from a notorious online tabloid, the kind that feeds on celebrity misery. The headline was a gut punch. "Grieving fiancé shut out by greedy dad. The tragic untold story of tech heiress Anna Cole." I clicked it. My hands were shaking. There was a photo of Nathan, a candid shot from the funeral, looking down his face, a perfect mask of tragic sorrow. Beside it was a grainy, unflattering photo of me from years ago caught mid-sentence at a zoning board meeting, my face twisted in what looked like anger. The article was a masterpiece of fiction. It painted Nathan as the secret love of Anna's life, her brilliant co-founder, who was unjustly pushed aside by her controlling geriatric father. It was full of anonymous quotes. A source close to the couple, which was clearly just Nathan, said Julian was always jealous of their bond. He couldn't stand that Anna was smarter than him, and he hated that her success was built on Nathan's original concepts. It twisted every single fact. My demand for him to leave my house, the article said I had violently threatened him. The locked apartment, I was holding his personal belongings and sentimental items hostage. It even mentioned the will, calling it a deathbed document that I had clearly forced on a heavily medicated and vulnerable woman. It was a public execution. He wasn't just trying to win in court. He was trying to destroy my reputation, to paint me as a senile, greedy, controlling monster. He was ensuring that when we did get to court, the judge would already have this narrative, this poison in their mind. This was his new front. He was losing the legal battle, so he had started a war of public opinion. He was banking on the idea that a 68-year-old engineer wouldn't know how to fight back in the mud. He was once again underestimating both me and my daughter. We were back at Anna's apartment. The air was thick with a new sour tension. That tabloid article. It felt like a physical stain on the room, a layer of grime sliming over every clean, minimalist surface. And the clock. The clock was our enemy. We had until 10 a.m. tomorrow. 10 a.m. That's when the hearing for Nathan's motion was scheduled. That's when he, with his slick lawyer and his court order, could legally burst in here, seize everything, and lock us out for good. And everything now included the small black solid-state hard drive plugged into Ms. Shaw's laptop, NR, insurance, and a single blinking cursor. A password prompt. What would she use? Ms. Shaw asked, her voice low. Think Julian. What mattered to her? What was fundamental? I stared at the blank white box. I am an engineer. I think in systems. I think in logic. Start with the basics, I said, my voice hoarse from the anger and the grief. I sat down, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her birthday, May 12th, Anna So 512. I typed it. Hit enter. A small red "Access Denied" flashed on the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. Okay. The company. She loved her company more than anything. Tech ethics. The founding date. Tech ethics 2017. I typed it in my fingers, fumbling slightly. Access denied. Try her mother's name, Ms. Shaw suggested, her voice tight. Isabel. Access denied. Isabel Cole. Access denied. I tried my birthday. Dad 1957. Julian Cole. Engineer Dad. Nothing. Access denied. Access denied. Access denied. My frustration was mounting, a hot, choking feeling. I slammed my palm on the glass coffee table, the sound sharp and ugly in the quiet room. Damn it, Anna, why would you make this so hard? The tabloid headline flashed in my mind. Geriatric father. Controlling. Was I so out of touch with my own daughter's mind that I couldn't even guess her password? She was a genius, Julian, Ms. Shaw said, not unkindly. She wouldn't have used something simple. She was a cryptographer at heart. It's not simple, it's personal, I muttered. I was thinking like me. I was thinking about things we shared, things we loved. I looked at the label again, the neat white print. NR, insurance. This wasn't a family photo album. This wasn't a diary of her hopes and dreams. This was a weapon. This was an insurance policy against Nathan Reed. The password wouldn't be something she loved. It would be something she never ever wanted to forget. It would be the reason she created the drive in the first place. I closed my eyes. I pushed aside the grief, the anger, the public humiliation. I went back. 6 years. I didn't just remember her telling me he was gone. I remembered the day. It was a Thursday. It was raining. She showed up at my house unannounced. She was wearing her old gray Tech Ethics hoodie, the one she practically lived in. She wasn't crying. That's what scared me. She was just hollow. She sat on my sofa, the one she used to do her homework on, and she stared at the blank television screen for almost an hour. I just sat with her. I made her tea. She didn't drink it. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was flat. "He's gone." I said, "Anna, honey, I'm so sorry." "No, Dad." She interrupted, her voice suddenly like ice. "He's not just gone. He tried to take the algorithm. He tried to sell it to a competitor." That was the day. The day the man she loved transformed from a bad boyfriend into a mortal enemy. The day she stopped being a trusting partner and became a protector. The day the contingency plan was born. I looked at the blinking cursor. My hands were shaking, but not from age, from absolute certainty. "It's not a word, Evelyn," I whispered. "It's a scar." I remembered the date. She had mentioned it in passing. As of October 10th, 2018, I am the sole owner of my future. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately. I didn't type a name. I typed a date. A memorial to the day her heart broke and her spine turned to steel. 1-0-1-0-2-0-1-8. I hit the enter key. For a second, nothing. The drive, just word. My heart was in my throat. And then, a soft digital click. The password prompt vanished. A single folder icon appeared on the desktop, stark and clear against Anna's minimalist wallpaper. The name beneath it was the one I saw on the label. NR. Insurance. I looked at Ms. Shaw. She looked at me. We were past the gate. The time for guessing was over. Now we had to face what was inside. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I double-clicked the folder. It opened instantly. There were no love letters. There were no sentimental photographs. My daughter, my brilliant, logical, engineer-brained daughter, had left behind something far more powerful. The folder contained 3 subfolders. Their names were cold, precise, and terrifying. The first was labeled Financials. The second, Security Video Chapters 10-18. The third, and the one that made my stomach clench with a sudden sick dread, was labeled Medical Sealed. "Evelyn," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Look at this." Ms. Shaw leaned in, her eyes sharp and analytical, scanning the screen. "Where do we start?" she asked. "Start with his core lie," I said, pointing to the first folder. "The money. He claims the company was his idea." Ms. Shaw clicked on Financials. It wasn't full of emails. It was full of spreadsheets, bank statements, and one file that immediately caught my eye, attempted wire transfer tent someone. Off. She opened it. It was a formal report from Tech Ethics' bank. It detailed an attempt by one Nathan Reed to wire $50,000 from the company's main operating account to a private offshore account in his name. The transfer had been flagged by the bank's fraud department and stopped. The date on the report was October 10th, 2018, the very day he stepped away. "My God," Ms. Shaw breathed. "He didn't just step away. He wasn't pushed aside. He was caught trying to steal. He was trying to embezzle." I said, the ugly truth settling on me. Anna had never told me this. She had been too ashamed, too proud, or maybe too smart. She had just said he tried to take the algorithm. She had hidden the grubby criminal details. He wasn't a partner, Julian, Ms. Shaw said, her voice like ice. He was a common thief. She clicked back to the main folder. Which brings us to this. Her finger hovered over the second file, security video 10/10/18. What is this? I asked. The report said the transfer was attempted at 9 a.m., Ms. Shaw said, her eyes narrowing. Let's see what was happening at the office that day. She clicked the file. It wasn't a long video. It was a single 5-minute clip from the security camera inside the main conference room. There was no audio, but there didn't need to be. The video opened on Anna, 6 years younger, sitting at the head of her own conference table. She looked calm, composed, her spine straight. Across from her was Nathan. He was not calm. He was on his feet, his face purple with rage. He was shouting. His hands were balled into fists. He was pacing, jabbing his finger at her. At one point, he slammed his hand down on the table so hard that the camera shook. Anna didn't flinch. She just sat there watching him, her expression unreadable. Then she calmly pushed a single piece of paper across the table. It was, I realized, the bank report. Nathan looked at it, and his entire demeanor changed. The rage evaporated, replaced by a new, pale, clammy fear. He tried to speak. He held his hands up. Anna just shook her head once. She picked up her phone. A moment later, 2 large security guards entered the room. They didn't touch him. They just stood on either side of him. Nathan looked at Anna one last time, his face a mask of disbelief and hatred. Then, defeated, he grabbed his briefcase. The 2 guards escorted him out of the room. The video ended. I stared at the black screen. This was the truth. Not a disagreement. Not a sad breakup. Not an amicable stepping away. It was a firing. A termination for cause. A humiliating, escorted off the premises firing for attempted theft. His entire story, his entire legal case, it was all a lie. The fiancé story was a desperate, fabricated smokescreen to hide the fact that he was just a disgruntled ex-employee and a criminal. Ms. Shaw was silent for a full 30 seconds. Her face was grim. She closed the video window. She looked at the 3rd folder. Medical sealed. Whatever is in there, she said, her voice low, is the final nail. Anna put it there for a reason. She then looked at her other screen at the tabloid article with its headline, Grieving Fiancé Shut Out. She looked at the court motion demanding access to the apartment. A slow, cold, dangerous smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk directly into a steel trap. Mr. Reed, she said, her voice a purr, wanted a public hearing. She turned her steel-gray eyes to me. Let's give him one. Let's give him the biggest, most public hearing of his entire pathetic life. The probate courtroom was not grand. It was a small, beige, windowless room that smelled of old paper and stale air conditioning. It was designed to drain the emotion out of family tragedies, to reduce lives to dockets and filings. But the air today was electric. It was packed. The tabloid article had done its job. Reporters were crammed in the back row, notebooks ready. Nathan sat at the opposing table not 10 feet away. He was a vision of sober, tragic grief. He wore a simple, dark suit. His face was composed in an expression of profound sadness. He looked like a man being forced to relive the worst day of his life. He was a magnificent actor. His lawyer Harrison was on his feet addressing the judge. He was not the cold corporate shark from Ms. Shaw's office. Today, he was a passionate advocate for the heartbroken. His voice was rich, and it filled the small room, dripping with sincerity. Your Honor, he was saying, his hands clasped, we are not here about money. We are here about love. A love that was tragically interrupted. a love that was systematically undermined by a controlling, jealous third party. He didn't look at me, but every eye in the room, including the judge's, flickered in my direction. Nathan Reed and Anna Cole were more than just a couple. Your Honor, Harrison continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. They were partners, soulmates. The brilliant company at the heart of this dispute, Tech Ethics, was not Anna's alone. It was theirs. It was born from their shared dreams, their late-night conversations. His ideas, her technical skill. A perfect symbiotic partnership. I could feel Ms. Shaw's hand on my arm, a light pressure keeping me anchored to my chair. The urge to stand up and call him a liar, to scream, was almost overwhelming. We have provided emails, Harrison said, gesturing to the file on the judge's bench. Emails where Anna herself admits, "It will always be our baby. Our baby, Your Honor. Not my company. Not my idea. Ours." He was good. He was twisting Anna's polite, ambiguous words into a binding verbal contract. And when Mr. Reed, in a moment of professional disagreement, stepped away, did their love end? No. He has testified they never broke up. And the proof is the engagement ring he gave her. The ring she kept. The ring she wore until the day she died. A symbol of a promise that in her heart was never broken. Nathan, on cue, dabbed at his eye with a handkerchief. The reporter's pens flew. It was a flawless performance. Harrison was painting a masterpiece of deception, and the judge was looking at it with a thoughtful, considerate expression. Harrison sat down, a look of profound, tragic satisfaction on his face. He had delivered his final line. The judge was looking at his notes, a deep frown on his face. The narrative was set, a greedy, controlling father versus a heartbroken, cheated partner. The room was still. And then Ms. Evelyn Shaw stood up. She didn't stand up with passion. She didn't stand up with anger. She stood up as if she were a university professor about to correct a fundamental error in a student's thesis. She was cold. She was precise. And she was holding a single, small, black hard drive. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and sharp, cutting through the heavy emotional atmosphere Harrison had created. Mr. Harrison has painted a very moving portrait of a tragic romance, a symbiotic partnership full of shared dreams. Nathan looked at her, his mask of sadness still firmly in place, but a new flicker of wariness in his eyes. He didn't like that she had the drive. Harrison, however, looked unbothered. He assumed it was just more emails, more things he could twist. Mr. Harrison has also, Ms. Shaw continued, repeatedly characterized his client's departure from Tech Ethics as a disagreement, a stepping away to give Anna space. She walked calmly to the court's audiovisual station. We would like to address that characterization directly. The defense would like to play a short video clip. It is from Tech Ethics' own internal time-stamped security archive dated October 10, 2018. The very day Mr. Reed claims he stepped away. A jolt went through the room. Objection! Harrison was on his feet in an instant. Your Honor, this is a clear invasion of privacy, a private couple's disagreement. This is a personal, emotional matter. This has no place in a probate hearing. Ms. Shaw didn't even turn to look at him. She just addressed the judge. Your Honor, this is not a private video. This is a corporate security file from a company conference room, and it is not irrelevant. It speaks directly to the nature of their relationship and the true circumstances of Mr. Reed's departure. The entire basis of his claim rests on his being a partner. This video will establish exactly what kind of partner he was. The judge looked at Harrison, then at Ms. Shaw. The reporters were leaning forward, pens poised. I'll allow it, the judge said, his voice gruff. But it had better be relevant, Ms. Shaw. Play the video. Ms. Shaw nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. She inserted the drive. A moment later, the monitors in the courtroom, the ones facing the judge, the press, and the one directly in front of Nathan, flickered to life. The image was clear, high definition. It was Anna's conference room. There was no audio. It wasn't needed. There was Anna, 6 years younger, sitting at the head of the table. She was calm, her back was straight, and there was Nathan. He was not calm. He was on his feet, his face a dark, ugly shade of red. He was visibly shouting, his mouth twisted. He was pacing. He jabbed his finger at Anna. Then, in a fit of rage, he slammed his open palm down on the polished table so hard the camera itself vibrated. Anna didn't even flinch. She just sat there watching him, her expression one of cold, final disappointment. I watched Nathan's face in the courtroom. His grieving fiancée mask was gone. His face was pale. He was staring at the screen at his younger self as if he were watching a ghost. On the screen, Anna calmly slid a single piece of paper across the table. I knew what it was. The bank report. We watched as Video Nathan stopped yelling. He looked down at the paper. We watched his entire demeanor change. The apoplectic rage vanished, replaced by a sudden, clammy, white-faced fear. He looked up at Anna, his mouth open. He held his hands up as if in surrender. He was pleading. Anna just looked at him. She shook her head once. A single final negative. Then she calmly picked up her desk phone. She said something and hung up. A few seconds later, the conference room door opened, and 2 large uniformed security guards entered the room. They didn't touch Nathan. They just flanked him. On the screen, Nathan looked from the guards back to Anna. His face was a contortion of disbelief, hatred, and humiliation. Defeated, he grabbed his briefcase. The 2 guards then escorted him, one in front, one behind, out of the room. The video ended. The screens went black. The courtroom was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The reporters were staring, mouths open, before they remembered to start writing. The judge was looking at the blank screen, his face grim. He then turned his eyes slowly to Nathan. Nathan was breathing heavily, his knuckles white on his own briefcase. His mask was shattered. He was exposed. Ms. Shaw let the silence hang for 3 full, brutal seconds. Then she spoke, her voice cutting through the stillness. "Your Honor, that was the disagreement. That was the stepping away. What you just witnessed was not a partner leaving a relationship. You witnessed a terminated employee. An employee being escorted off the premises by security, immediately after he was caught attempting to embezzle $50,000 from Anna Cole's company." A bomb had gone off. Harrison was sputtering, "Your Honor, this is prejudicial. This is—" But it was too late. The entire narrative had been ripped to shreds. Nathan was cornered. He was exposed. He was ruined. And he did what all cornered, ruined men do. He panicked. He lost control. The monitors flickered to life. Harrison was on his feet before the image even settled. "Objection. Your Honor, this is a flagrant violation of privacy. This is a gotcha tactic. This is a private, emotional moment between a couple recorded without my client's consent." The judge's eyes were fixed on the screen. "Is it Mr. Harrison, or is it a corporate security feed in a corporate office which is the property of the corporation? Sit down. Your objection is noted and overruled. Play the clip, Ms. Shaw." Ms. Shaw nodded once. The courtroom was dead silent. She pressed the spacebar. The image was sharp, high definition. The timestamp in the corner read, October 10, 2018, 09:15 a.m. The location, conference room A. The court technician unmuted the audio. A tinny, sharp sound filled the room. It was Nathan's voice. But it was not the smooth, tragic, heartbroken voice we had been hearing all morning. This was a high-pitched, ugly snarl. "You can't be serious!" The video Nathan shrieked. He was on his feet, looming over the table. Anna, 6 years younger, sat opposite him, her back perfectly straight. "You think you can just cut me out? After everything I built, you are nothing without me, Anna. You're just a coder. I was the vision, I was the one who made this happen." Anna's voice, when it came, was so cold and calm, it was brutal. The vision. Nathan, was your vision to try and wire $50,000 from the company's main account to an unsecured offshore account this morning? A pin dropping would have sounded like a bomb. In the video, Nathan's face, which had been purple with rage, went a stark, sickly white. In the courtroom beside me, I watched Harrison's face do the exact same thing. The lawyer turned slowly to look at his client. His client, who was staring at the screen, his mouth open, breathing fast. Harrison hadn't known. He had been fed the same pack of lies as the rest of us. He was a co-conspirator who didn't even know the nature of the crime. That was, Nathan stammered on the screen. That was a mistake. A clerical error. You know that. I was moving it for liquidity. It was attempted grand larceny, Nathan, Anna's voice replied, cutting him off. And it was the last in a long, long line of deceptions. You're fired. Give me your keycard and your company laptop. This was the moment. The explosion. Nathan's face contorted. You ungrateful bitch! He screamed. The word echoed in the silent courtroom. You can't fire me, I built this. This company will be nothing without me. It will collapse in 6 months. You hear me? Collapse. You need me. Anna didn't even look at him. She didn't flinch. She simply picked up her desk phone. Her voice was steady. Security, please. Conference room A. She hung up. And then she waited. The video played on. The next 30 seconds were the most excruciating I have ever witnessed. They just sat there. Nathan trembling, his face a mask of sweat and fury, his chest heaving. Anna perfectly still, her hands folded on the table, watching him. Not with hate, with finality. The conference room door opened. The 2 large uniformed security guards entered. They were the same 2 from the photo, but now they were real and they were impassive. Miss Cole, one of them said. Anna pointed at Nathan. Mr. Reed has been terminated. He is to return his company property and be escorted from the premises. He is not to be allowed back in this building, ever. Anna, don't do this. Nathan pleaded, his voice suddenly small. He was no longer a partner. He was a beggar. Anna, please. Nathan, she said, her voice like steel. Return the security card. Now. We all watched. The reporters. The judge. We watched as the grieving fiancé slowly with a shaking hand reached into his expensive wallet. We watched him pull out his keycard and slide it pathetically across the polished table. One of the guards picked it up. The other guard picked up Nathan's laptop bag from the chair. This way, sir, the guard said. The video's final shot was of Nathan being walked out. He paused at the door. He looked back at Anna, who was already turning to her computer. And the look on his face, it wasn't sadness. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the purest, most murderous hatred I have ever seen. The door closed. The screen went black. The silence in the courtroom was a physical weight. The reporters were frozen, staring at the blank screens before they remembered to start writing. Their pens sounded like an avalanche in the quiet. The judge was not looking at the screen. He was looking directly at Nathan. His expression was one of complete and utter disgust. Miss Shaw stood up into that terrible, damning silence. She let it hang for 3 full, brutal seconds. Then she spoke, her voice cutting through the stillness. Your Honor, that was the disagreement. That was the stepping away. That was the soulmate. What you just witnessed was not a partner being cheated. You witnessed a criminal being fired. And his entire claim here today, this performance of grief, it isn't just a lie. It's perjury. Perjury. The word hung in the air, sharp and deadly as a shard of glass. Harrison, Nathan's lawyer, looked like he had been physically struck. He turned his face pale and slack with shock to his client. He had been played. He had built an entire case on a foundation of lies, and he had just watched his client get exposed as both a thief and a perjurer in open court. The reporters in the back were no longer writing. They were just staring, their minds scrambling to process the sheer audacity of Nathan's deception. The judge looked down from his bench, his face a mask of cold fury. "Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "do you have any response to what we have just seen? Any at all? Or were you planning to let this farce continue?" Harrison opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He was done. His case was in flames. But Nathan was not done. I watched him. The mask of the tragic lover was gone. The cold reptilian anger from the video was back, but now it was amplified by pure animal panic. He was a rat trapped in a steel box, and he was about to chew off his own leg. He saw the $34 million. He saw his entire future, his life of stolen luxury, evaporating. He saw me, the geriatric father, and Ms. Shaw, the woman who had just dismantled him, and something inside him simply snapped. He shoved his chair back so hard it crashed onto the floor. "No!" he screamed, his voice cracking a raw, ugly sound that made everyone jump. "No! You don't get to do this!" Harrison grabbed his arm. "Nathan, sit down, shut up!" But Nathan ripped his arm away. He was on his feet, his finger pointing, shaking, not at Ms. Shaw, but at me. "He's lying. She's lying. That's not how it was. She owed me. She knew she owed me." "Mr. Reed, you will be silent or I will have you held in contempt," the judge boomed. "She owed me," Nathan shrieked again, his face a grotesque mask of sweat and fury. "She stole it all from me, the company, the money, my life." He was completely unhinged, all pretense of sanity gone. And then he played his final, most venomous card. He looked at the judge, his eyes wild. "She didn't just fire me. She didn't just steal my company. She aborted my child, our baby. She killed our baby without even asking me." The courtroom didn't just go silent. It ceased to exist. The air was sucked out of the room, replaced by a vacuum so total it was deafening. "She aborted my child." The words echoed even though he had only screamed them once. They hung in the beige, stale air, vibrating with a grotesque, venomous energy. The reporters in the back were frozen, their pens halfway to their pads, their faces a mask of utter, stunned disbelief. The judge, who had been on the verge of slamming his gavel, was now stock still, his mouth slightly open. Even Nathan's own lawyer, Harrison, looked like he had been shot. But I barely saw them. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I physically grabbed the edge of the defense table to keep from falling. My legs, my 68-year-old legs, had simply given out. A child. A baby. My grandchild. The breath left my lungs in a painful, silent gasp. It wasn't just the accusation. It was the possibility. A life. A piece of Anna. A piece of me. And I had never known. "Julian." Ms. Shaw's voice was sharp, but it sounded like it was coming from a million miles away. I couldn't look at her, and I was staring at Nathan, this monster, this man who had just ripped open a wound I never even knew existed. He was breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his eyes still wild, but now there was a new cunning gleam in them. He saw my reaction. He saw the doubt. He saw the pain he had just inflicted. "She didn't tell you, did she, old man?" he sneered, his voice dropping from a shriek to a low, triumphant growl. "Of course not. She couldn't tell her perfect, controlling daddy. She just got rid of it. Got rid of my son. Like she got rid of me. Like she was just taking out the trash." I felt myself swaying. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, rose in my throat. It couldn't be true. Anna, my Anna. She wouldn't do that. She wouldn't. But why wouldn't she have told me? The doubt was a poison seeping into the cracks of my grief. What if she was pregnant and she was scared? Scared of him, scared of me. The entire narrative of the room, which moments ago had been one of disgust at Nathan, had suddenly horribly shifted. He had recast himself. He was no longer just the thief. He was the grieving father, the doubly wronged victim. He had just painted my dead daughter Anna as a cold-blooded killer. And I had no answer. I was just a broken old man, gape-mouthed, destroyed by a revelation I had never seen coming. The silence in the courtroom was a physical, crushing weight. I was choking on it. My daughter, a baby, aborted. His word was a poisoned dart, and it had found its mark. I was devastated. I was blind with a pain I didn't even know was possible. I stared at Nathan, this thing. He was breathing hard, his chest puffed up. He was no longer a cornered rat. He was a triumphant monster. He had just thrown a bomb into the room, and he was staring at my wreckage, at my broken, gasping face with a look of pure, victorious hatred. He thought he had won. He thought he had just played the one card that could silence us all, the one card that reframed him as the ultimate victim. He had just painted my dead daughter as a monster. And then through the fog of my own agony, I heard a sound. A simple, small sound. The sound of a chair sliding back, not crashing, but moving with deliberate, quiet intent. Ms. Evelyn Shaw stood up. She was not swaying. She was not pale. She was not in any way shocked. Her face was a mask of cold, controlled, righteous fury. She had been waiting for this. She had anticipated this. Nathan, in his desperate, panicked lunge, had just done the one thing she had been waiting for him to do. He had walked right into the final waiting jaws of the trap. "Your Honor," she said. Her voice was not loud. It was not a shriek. It was so cold, so clear, and so full of deadly precision that it cut through the poisoned air like a shard of ice. Every eye in the room, including Nathan's wild, triumphant ones, snapped to her. "A moment ago," Ms. Shaw continued, "Mr. Reed committed perjury when he lied under oath about the circumstances of his termination from Tech Ethics. We have all seen the video that proves unequivocally that he is a liar and a thief." She took a small step forward, her eyes locked on the judge. "He has just done so again." Nathan's triumphant look wavered, a flicker of confusion passing over his face. What are you talking about?" "She did it. She killed my baby." Ms. Shaw didn't even look at him. She held up her hand, silencing him without a glance. "Your Honor, it is profoundly interesting that Mr. Reed has chosen to bring up the subject of a pregnancy. He has done so under the assumption that he is the only one who knows about it. He has done so to slander a dead woman who he believes cannot defend herself." She paused, and for the first time she turned her head and fixed Nathan with a look of such absolute bone-chilling contempt that he actually took a step back. "He is mistaken." She turned back to the judge. "Anna Cole can defend herself because she knew this man." She spat the word man like it was poison. She knew his character. She knew that if he ever came back, he would come back with every lie he could invent. She held up the small black hard drive, the NR insurance drive. "Your Honor, when we accessed this drive, we found 3 folders. We have shown you 2. Financials NR, which proved he was an embezzler, and Security Video 1018, which proved he was a liar. We will now address the 3rd folder." Her voice dropped and the entire courtroom leaned in. "The 3rd folder, Your Honor, the one my client Anna Cole sealed and labeled separately, is titled Medical Sealed." A gasp went through the room. Harrison, Nathan's lawyer, looked like he was going to be sick. He was staring at Nathan, his face white. You didn't tell me. Anna Cole was a genius," Ms. Shaw said, her voice resonating with the power of the truth. "She was meticulous. She was prepared. She knew that this man might one day use this sacred private tragedy as a weapon. And so, she left us the truth. Not a story, not a memory, but the proof." She placed the hard drive into the court's computer. "With the court's permission, I would like to introduce the contents of Medical Sealed into the record. I believe it will be the last piece of evidence this court requires." The judge's chamber was so quiet, the only sound was the electric hum of the computer. He stared at Ms. Shaw. "Proceed," he said, his voice a low gravel. "Show us the contents of medical sealed." Nathan was frozen. His eyes were wide, fixed on the drive in Ms. Shaw's hand. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. He had just told the most explosive lie he could imagine, only to find that Anna, from beyond the grave, had an answer for it. "As you'll see, Your Honor," Ms. Shaw said, her voice narrating as she clicked open the folder. "There are 3 documents in this file. All are certified official records." She opened the first. It was a scanned PDF, a patient file from a hospital. "The first," she said, "is a medical report from St. Jude's Hospital. The patient is Anna Isabel Cole. The date is October 11th, 2018. My heart stopped. That was the day after the video, the day after she fired him. "I will read from the attending physician's diagnosis," Ms. Shaw said, and her voice for the first time had a slight controlled tremble of rage. "Patient presented to the emergency room at 2 a.m. with severe abdominal cramping and hemorrhaging. Diagnosis: spontaneous abortion incomplete. Gestational age: 10 weeks. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I gripped the table again. 10 weeks. She was pregnant. My daughter was pregnant. A grandchild. My hand flew to my mouth. Nathan. He had been telling the truth. For a split second, the room spun. Nathan's own expression was one of sick, twisted validation. "See," he whispered, his voice cracking. "See, I told you, she—" "I have not finished, Mr. Reed." Ms. Shaw snapped her voice like a whip. "That is the diagnosis, but what is most relevant is the cause." She clicked on the second document. "This is the attending physician's supplemental notes, an addendum he was legally required to file." She read from the screen, her voice slow and clear, each word a hammer blow. "Patient was evasive about the cause of her distress, but a physical examination revealed significant non-contemporaneous bruising on the upper arms and right abdomen. Bruising is consistent with severe blunt force trauma." Blunt force trauma. The words didn't make sense. I looked at Anna's face in my mind, then at the video of Nathan, his face purple, slamming his hand on the table. "What?" I whispered. "What does that mean?" Ms. Shaw turned her gaze to me, and for the first time I saw not a lawyer, but a woman filled with a terrible, profound sorrow. "It means she didn't just have an abortion, Julian," she said, her voice breaking just for a second. "She had a miscarriage." "No," Nathan whispered from his table. "No, she told me she was... He was stammering, his face turning from triumphant red to a pale, sickly, greenish white. He was finally understanding. He had walked into a trap of his own making. "Mr. Reed is correct about one thing," Ms. Shaw said, turning back to the judge. "He is the father, but he is not the victim. He is the cause." She let the accusation hang in the dead air. "He came in here and perjured himself, screaming that my client had an abortion. The truth, the medical truth, is that she lost her child because someone assaulted her." "That's a lie!" Nathan shrieked, finding his voice. "That's speculation. You can't prove that she could have fallen. She could have... It wasn't me." "Couldn't I sell?" Ms. Shaw said, her voice lethally quiet. She clicked on the third and final document. "Your Honor, this is a police report, filed by the City of Miami Police Department, Precinct 7. It is dated October 10th, 2018, the night of Mr. Reed's termination. The call came in at 9:45 p.m. She read from the report. Dispatch received an anonymous 911 call from a resident at. She read Anna's building address, reporting violent, escalating screaming from apartment 12B. The caller reported hearing a woman's voice shouting, get out," followed by what the witness described as a loud crash and the sound of a body hitting the wall. The courtroom was so quiet I could not breathe. I was no longer grieving. I was just hollow. Hollow and filled with a cold, black, endless rage. The report continues. Ms. Shaw said, her voice relentless. Officers were dispatched. Upon arrival, they were met in the lobby by a male identified as Nathan Reed, who was visibly agitated and leaving the premises. He claimed he and his girlfriend had a bad argument. The officers proceeded to apartment 12B. The resident, Anna Cole, spoke to them through the door chain. She was visibly distressed, but stated she had tripped and fallen and that she did not require assistance. She refused to file a report. Ms. Shaw finally closed the folder. She turned not to the judge but to Nathan. He had collapsed into his chair. He was staring at her, his mouth open, his eyes glassy with abject terror. He was at last silent. "So let us reconstruct the timeline, shall we?" Ms. Shaw said, her voice the only sound in the universe. "At 9 a.m., Mr. Reed is fired for attempted embezzlement. We saw the video. We saw his rage. At 9:45 p.m., he violates his termination and goes to Anna's apartment. A neighbor hears a violent physical struggle. At 2 a.m., Anna is in the emergency room having a miscarriage. The doctors find bruising consistent with blunt force trauma. And 6 years later, that same man, that thief, that abuser, dares to stand in this courtroom. He dares to perjure himself, to slander her memory, and to scream under oath that she killed his baby." She pointed a single shaking finger at Nathan. He didn't know she was pregnant. He was just so consumed with his own pathetic narcissistic rage that he went to her home, and he beat her. He attacked her, and he killed his own unborn child. And then he came in here for $34 million and accused her of the crime. The payoff. The final brutal revelation landed in the courtroom with the force of a physical blow. Ms. Shaw's words, "He accused her of the crime," hung in the dead, poisoned air. It was no longer a probate hearing. It was an execution. Nathan wasn't a victim. He wasn't a grieving fiancé. He wasn't even just a thief. He was an abuser. A violent, pathetic, narcissistic abuser who had in his rage killed his own unborn child. And then 6 years later, he had walked into this courtroom, wrapped himself in a cloak of manufactured grief, and tried to profit from the very tragedy he himself had inflicted. He hadn't just lied. He had built his entire case, his entire claim to $34 million on the slander of the woman he had victimized. He hadn't just committed perjury about the video. He had committed perjury about the reason the baby was gone. He had, in his ultimate act of desperation, screamed about the one event that could and did utterly destroy him. He had taken his greatest sin and tried to use it as his greatest weapon, not knowing that Anna, my brilliant, prepared, far-sighted daughter, had already loaded it, aimed it, and left it for him to find. He had just pulled the trigger on himself. I looked at him. He was no longer a monster. He was just a man. A pathetic, broken, small man. He had collapsed back into his chair. His mouth was open, his face a ghastly, waxy, greenish white. He was staring at Ms. Shaw, his eyes glassy and completely vacant. There was no fight left, no anger, no arrogance. There was just nothing. He was a hollow shell. The man who had walked in here expecting to leave with a fortune was now just empty. His lawyer Harrison was slowly, meticulously packing his leather briefcase. He did not look at his client. He did not look at the judge. He just snapped the brass clasps shut, his face a mask of cold, professional fury. He had been humiliated. His reputation was in tatters, all because he had believed the lies of a sociopath. The trap had sprung. The NR's insurance policy had just paid out in full. It wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. Anna had made sure that if he ever crawled out from under his rock, he would be walking directly into the light. And now he was. The silence that followed Ms. Shaw's final damning words was absolute. It was a vacuum, a black hole that had consumed every lie, every whisper, every bit of oxygen in the room. Nathan was a collapsed star. He was just a void staring at nothing, his skin a waxy, translucent gray. Harrison, his lawyer, was already standing, his briefcase in hand, his face a mask of cold, professional rage at his own client. He looked like a man who wanted to incinerate his suit just for having been in the same room. And then the judge spoke. His voice was no longer the gruff, impartial tone of a jurist. It was the voice of a man who had just witnessed something truly vile. It was a low, rumbling thunder. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, his eyes not leaving Nathan. "You will sit down. You are not dismissed." Harrison froze and with visible reluctance sat back in his chair as far from Nathan as he could get. The judge turned his gaze like two burning coals onto Nathan. "Mr. Reed, in my 20 years on this bench, I have seen greed. I have seen family disputes. I have seen desperation." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "But I do not believe I have ever in my entire career witnessed such a calculated, despicable, and shameless abuse of the court system." The words hit like a physical blow. The reporters scribbled furiously. "You came into this courtroom," the judge continued, his voice rising with each word, "under the sacred protection of an oath. And you used that oath to perform. You constructed a fantasy. You lied about your relationship. You lied about your termination. You lied about your involvement in tech ethics." He picked up the stack of papers from Nathan's initial petition and held them in the air as if they were a piece of rotting garbage. "You slandered a dead woman. You attempted to defraud her grieving father. And you did it all by twisting a personal, horrific tragedy, a tragedy you inflicted, into a weapon for your own financial gain." He threw the papers down onto his bench. They scattered. "The emergency motion by the petitioner Nathan Reed is denied. The injunction on the estate of Anna Cole is dissolved effective immediately. The petition to contest the will is dismissed with extreme prejudice." With extreme prejudice. The words were a legal guillotine. It meant he could never, ever file this claim again. It was over. The $34 million was safe. Anna's will was ironclad. "This court," the judge concluded, his voice booming in the small room, "finds that your entire claim is fraudulent, frivolous, and an act of profound, malicious bad faith." He picked up his gavel. He looked past Nathan, past me, to the bailiff at the back of the room. And he did not look away. The judge's gavel had not yet even touched the wood. He had dismissed the case. The civil matter was over. The money was safe. But Evelyn Shaw was not finished. She did not sit down. She did not pack her briefcase. She did not even look at me. She turned her back straight, and her eyes scanned the back of the courtroom past the stunned reporters. She found the person she was looking for. A man in a simple, unassuming suit, who had been sitting quietly in the back row, observing the entire proceeding. He was not a reporter. "Your Honor," Ms. Shaw said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Before this court is adjourned, I would like to address Assistant District Attorney Markham, who is present in this courtroom today." A new electric shock went through the room. The reporters' heads snapped toward the man in the back. Nathan, who had been a hollow gray shell, slowly lifted his head, a new cold animal fear dawning in his glassy eyes. Harrison, who was halfway out of his chair, froze. The man Markham stood up and nodded grimly to the judge. "Mr. Markham," Ms. Shaw said, turning to face him. Her voice was no longer that of a probate lawyer. It was the voice of a prosecutor. Over the course of this hearing, this court has been presented with definitive, irrefutable evidence that Nathan Reed, she pointed directly at him, has under oath committed multiple counts of felony perjury. We have seen the video. We have heard his lies. She took a step toward the ADA. This court has also been presented with bank records proving a clear, premeditated attempt at grand larceny. And finally, this court has been presented with a police report and a corresponding medical file that strongly unequivocally indicate a case of severe domestic assault resulting in a miscarriage. An assault that Mr. Reed then used perjuriously as the entire basis for his fraudulent claim. She stood before the prosecutor. We are not just a civil party, sir. We are victims of a crime. Multiple crimes. On behalf of the estate of Anna Cole, and on behalf of her father Julian Cole, my office formally requests that the District Attorney's Office open an immediate and full criminal investigation into Nathan Reed for aggravated fraud, for felony perjury, and for the assault and battery that led to the death of his unborn child 6 years ago. The Assistant District Attorney Markham looked at Ms. Shaw. He looked at the judge. He looked at the mountain of evidence, the video, the bank report, the medical file, the police report. And then he looked at Nathan Reed, who was now a trembling, hollowed-out shell of a man finally understanding that the game was not just over. His life was. Your Honor, Markham said, his voice clear and carrying across the stunned room. The District Attorney's Office takes perjury, fraud, and severe domestic assault very seriously. We have heard the testimony. We have seen the evidence. We agree that a full criminal investigation is not only warranted, it is required. The judge nodded a single sharp motion. This court, he boomed, is adjourned, and he brought his gavel down with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. It was over. But it wasn't. Nathan was still sitting catatonic as people began to move. Harrison, his lawyer, was gone. He had slipped out of the courtroom like a snake shedding its skin, wanting no part of the criminal fallout. The reporters were on their feet, scrambling for the exit, desperate to be the first to break the story. But two uniformed police officers who had been standing discreetly by the door were now moving into the courtroom, not out of it. They walked calmly, purposefully, led by ADA Markham. They walked past me. They walked past Ms. Shaw. And they stopped one on either side of Nathan Reed's chair. Nathan Reed, Markham said, his voice no longer for the court, but for the criminal. Nathan looked up, his eyes glassy and uncomprehending. He looked like a man waking up from a dream only to find himself in a nightmare. You are under arrest for suspicion of felony perjury and aggravated fraud. One of the officers pulled Nathan's hands behind his back. Nathan didn't resist. He was boneless. He was empty. The officer produced a pair of handcuffs. Click, click. The sound, the sharp metallic sound of the cuffs locking into place, was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of the trap snapping shut. It was the sound of my daughter's final, perfect, meticulous victory. He had come into this courtroom to take $34 million. He was leaving in handcuffs. He thought he was messing with a grieving 68-year-old father. He thought I was weak. He thought I was old. He thought I was stupid. He messed with the wrong dad. But more than that, he had messed with the wrong daughter. He had underestimated the brilliant, far-sighted, unbreakable woman he had tried to destroy. And she, from beyond the grave, had just delivered her own final, perfect judgment. I walked out of the courtroom, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I could breathe. The air in the hallway, though still stale and recycled, felt clean. Ms. Shaw was beside me. She didn't say, "Congratulations." She didn't say, "We won." She just walked with me, a silent, steady presence. We took the elevator down in that same silence. When we stepped out into the bright, jarring sunlight of the city, she finally turned to me. Her face, which had been a mask of iron and steel for 2 days, was soft. The sadness had returned to her eyes. "Julian," she said, There is one last thing. Back at the apartment. We drove to Anna's condo. The silence in the car was heavy but different. It wasn't the silence of tension. It was the silence of an ending, of a story that had finally brutally been told. We went up in the elevator, my thumbprint granting us access, a right that Nathan would now never have. The apartment was just as we had left it. The laptop was still on the coffee table. The NR insurance folder was still open on the screen, its 3 dark subfolders a testament to the battle we had just won. Evelyn, I started, my voice hoarse. I don't know how to thank you. For what you did. For what Anna did it all, Julian, she said, cutting me off gently. I was just the executor, in every sense of the word. She pointed to the screen. It wasn't at the 3 folders. It was at a single separate file in the main directory. A simple text document. I hadn't even noticed it before. The file was named for dad.txt. My heart, which had just begun to beat, normally seized in my chest. This was not for the court. This was not for the lawyers. This was for me. My hand was shaking. I had faced the video. I had faced the police report. I had faced the monster. Now I had to face my daughter. Ms. Shaw saw my hand tremble. She gave a small, understanding nod. I'll make some tea, she said quietly, and she retreated to the kitchen, giving me the privacy I didn't even know how to ask for. I sat on the sofa. I stared at the file name. For Dad. It was the last thing she would ever say to me. I clicked it. The file opened. It was a letter. Dad, it began. If you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. It means I'm gone. And it means he came back. I am so sorry. I am so sorry, Dad, that you are having to go through this. I am so sorry for the pain this must be causing you. I felt my eyes burn the tears I had refused to shed in court, now blurring her words. I knew he would, the letter continued. I knew his narcissism. I knew his ego. He couldn't stand that I had succeeded without him. I knew that if I left, he would see my death not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity, a payday. He would crawl out from under his rock, and he would try to take everything just like he tried to in the beginning. He never understood me. He always thought I was just a naive coder. He never understood that I was your daughter, that I'm an engineer just like you. I don't just build things, I build contingencies. The NR insurance drive. It was never for me, Dad. I didn't need it. I knew the truth. It was for you. It was a weapon I had to leave behind, a weapon only you could find. I had to protect you. I couldn't leave you defenseless against him. I knew he would lie. I knew he would twist everything. I even knew he might bring up the baby. My breath hitched. My hand covered my mouth. I'm so sorry I never told you, she wrote. I couldn't. I couldn't make that my pain and yours. When he did that, it broke something in me. Not just my body. It broke my trust in the world. So I built a wall. I put the truth in that file. I locked it away. I didn't tell you because I couldn't bear to see that pain in your eyes. Please, please forgive me for not letting you in. I had to survive. I was weeping now, openly sobs tearing through my 68-year-old body. I forgive you, I whispered to the empty room. I forgive you. But now, the letter went on, the money, the 34 million. It's not for you, Dad. I mean, it is for you, but it's not for you to just sit on. It's not a retirement fund. It's a purpose. I wiped my eyes, trying to focus. A purpose. That money is a seed, Dad. It's the seed for the Isabel and Anna Cole Foundation. I've left all the groundwork in Evelyn's care. I want you to build it. You, Dad, my engineer, my builder. I want you to build a foundation that provides legal aid, financial support, and safe, secure housing for victims of domestic and financial abuse. For all the other women and men who get trapped. For everyone who thinks they have to face a monster alone. He took my child from me, Dad. But with this, with you, we can save thousands of others. We can give them the one thing I had to build for myself, a fortress, a way out. I finished the letter. I sat there on her sofa in her silent apartment. The grief was still there. It was a mountain. It would never move. I would live in its shadow for the rest of my life. But I was no longer buried by it. I looked at my hands, my old engineer's hands. They had built bridges. They had built systems. Now they had one last thing to build. I had lost my daughter. I had lost my grandchild. But I had just found my final and most important assignment. I was no longer just a grieving father. I was no longer just a retired engineer. I was the builder of Anna's legacy. And order at last had been restored. This experience, as horrifying as it was, taught me something profound about my daughter and about the nature of truth. A manipulator like Nathan believes their version of reality, their performance, can overwrite facts. They believe lies are tools. But Anna, my brilliant Anna, knew better. She knew that the only antidote to a lie is irrefutable, documented proof. She taught me that true strength isn't just facing a monster. It's about meticulously building the cage for him long before he even appears. The truth, when weaponized by preparation, is the ultimate justice. What did you think of Anna's NR? Insurance plan. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.